Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com, on Roku, Dwyer Boxing, and Sports News. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. You got a huge dust-up coming up. This might be the fight of the year. It's big, right? It's on par with any other fight, right? Klitschko, Fury, etc. And it's the fight between Saul Canelo Alvarez and Miguel Cotto. Now let me say this. If you don't know about the Mexican-Puerto Rican rivalry, especially in the sport of boxing, then you need to study it, right? Because this fight, quite frankly, is just the latest in a long line of great fights between fighters from the two countries, right? Think Salvador Sanchez, one of the best fighters I have ever seen, against Wilfredo Gomez. Think Orlando Salido against Juan Manuel Lopez, right? I encourage you to revisit those fights. They're masterpieces. Think Oscar De La Hoya against Felix Trinidad, right? I know De La Hoya also has American roots, but really, you know, his heritage is Mexican. That was an epic fight between two unbeaten fighters. Think Julio Cesar Chavez against Hector Camacho, right? I still maintain that some of the fastest hands I've ever seen in my life was Hector Camacho's when he was a young man. Now, the outside world might not fully get it, but then the outside world doesn't have the boxing heritage that these two countries have. Understand, there are very few countries in the world that have the boxing heritage of Mexico and Puerto Rico, right? If you think hard, you might come up with names like Haiti, right? Adonis Stevenson, Jean Pascal, right? Andre Berto, Romain Stavern, just to name four on the world stage. You might think of the Ukraine, right? Vasyl Lomachenko, right? The Klitschko brothers, Dmitry Pirog way back when. But understand, these two countries, you know, from the time I was a little boy until now, per capita, have among the best fighters in the world. Saul Alvarez and Miguel Cotto are just the latest chapter, and it's going to be a glorious chapter. But I have a clear favorite in this fight. Before I reveal the choice, let me just tell you the attributes, the styles. And I believe by the time I finish my last sentence, you'll know who I think is the superior fighter. And let me point out, I think this fight ends by stoppage, right? I'm expecting a KO. Whatever move I make, I'm going to make sure I put a little bit on this guy by KO. I'm going to take one fighter, I'm going to hedge it with the other guy by KO. But understand, I personally believe the winner gets a stoppage. Now, the way I see it, to figure out the winner, just consider the following statements. Now, let me start by saying both guys have two of the best left hooks in boxing, right? I've always said, Saul Alvarez, when he hits Carlos Baldomir with the left hook, Baldomir's unconscious before he hits the canvas. I've watched Canelo in very close fights hit guys with left hooks, and then the guy stays away from the pocket for 2 or 3 rounds. Right? The guy knows he's been buzzed. I've watched Saul Alvarez have some rocky starts to fights. Right? Cotto's brother. Alfonso Gomez. Countless others. And I've noticed that his left hook is a difference maker in those fights. Josecito Lopez turns the tide of many of those fights. I'll just say this. Paulie Malignaggi has fought a lot of people. When asked who the hardest puncher he's faced is, Malignaggi didn't blink. He said the hardest puncher he's faced is Miguel Cotto. I can tell you I was in a bar watching Cotto against a fighter I thought was going to beat him, Sergio Martinez. And I have to concede I had never in my life seen Sergio Martinez hit like that. Both guys have great left hands. Both guys have explosive KO power. Right? You just have to look back to their last fights. Canelo against James Kirkland. Right? Kirkland, quite frankly, looks like he's been hit not by a car but by a truck. Right? Think back to the Daniel Geale fight. I'll just say this. You know, Daniel Geale has been in the ring with some big hitters. I didn't see a lot of protests from Daniel Geale when that fight was called. Now, that said, I'll just say this. In my opinion, only one of these guys can fight low. Come in, bend, have their head around your solar plexus, go to work, and stay low. Right? Only one of these guys can not only jump in the pocket, but more importantly, can jump out of the pocket. Only one of these guys has, to me, very quick strike capability. Right? He's there, then he's not there. Then the angle changes. Then as you turn to look at him with cat quickness, he's back in. Right? Only one of these guys has cat-like reflexes. Where you're looking at the film, the other guy suddenly wilts and you say, whoa, whoa. You know, it's on the replay that you notice the reset and the punch. Right? Only one of these guys has cat-like reflexes. I'll say this. Only one of these guys, in my opinion, can hide his head. Right? I'll say this. One guy's pretty straight up. You always notice his head and neck. Right? He's upright. He fights like Vladimir Klitschko. The other guy's a bit different. The other guy at times has his head down here someplace, doesn't he? Has his head tucked, has a shoulder up. Right? If I'm throwing hooks from this side, I'm going to hit shoulder. Right? One of these guys hides his head and rolls. It's hard to find. Right? You'll notice his head and neck disappear at times. Let me say this. Only one of these fighters, in my opinion, fights 3 minutes of most rounds. Right? One of these guys, when the bullets start flying, he's flying with the bullets. Right? You watch him and he'll go toe to toe. There's action. You'll notice there's so much action from this guy that some of his opponents wilt. The other guy will look good, but it's episodic. He'll look good for the first 20 seconds. Then he takes time off. It's kind of like a Bernard Hopkins type thing. Right? He takes time off. You know, he'll be engaged. He'll be roughing up the guy he's going up against. Roughing him up. The other guy will be barely hanging on. Then suddenly, he'll back away. Not because of any fear, but because of fatigue. Because of pacing. Because if he empties the gun in the first minute of the round, he has nothing left for the other 2 minutes. Right? Only one of these guys fights 3 minutes of every round. And let me say this. Only one of these guys, in my opinion, can be highly defensive. And I mean highly defensive, while being highly offensive. In other words, one of these guys can throw punches and at the same time, as I said earlier, have a head hidden, right? Be hitting you with shots, have an arm bar up while he's hitting you with shots. Be up on your chest, right? He's pummeling you. You can't find him, right? He's too close. He's too up on you. Now, I'll say this. If you've tracked my comments here, you'll know that yes, I believe Miguel Cotto wins this fight. As I've said earlier in this video, yes, I believe Miguel Cotto wins this fight by stoppage. I'm expecting Miguel Cotto to become the first man to stop Saul Alvarez inside of 12 rounds. Understand, Cotto is very different from, let's say, Erislandy Lara. Right? Lara's coming in, he's trying to outbox you. Cotto's trying to hurt you. Cotto's trying to end the fight. Right? Understand the problems Cotto had against Pacquiao. A guy who is a southpaw unlike Canelo. A guy who's shorter than Canelo. A guy who Cotto couldn't get underneath. In other words, Cotto can fight low. But Pacquiao isn't the tallest man in the ring. Right? And so it's hard to get low for Pacquiao. Also, that angle thing Cotto sets up where he has his head hidden, so he's stopping hooks and stuff. Pacquiao throws straight punches. Right? They're straight. I don't think Saul Alvarez fights the same way Manny Pacquiao fights. I'll concede Alvarez has a nice straight right hand. Right? But he doesn't have a hair trigger on it. Like Vladimir Klitschko, he is cautious. He has to set it up. Everything has to come together for him to throw that straight right hand. Right? Like Vladimir Klitschko, he's too structured. Right? He needs for things to be a certain way. He's not going to fight you on the inside. Right? Just like Vladimir Klitschko's not going to fight you on the inside. Klitschko's going to try to hold you. Right? Canelo's going to try to lean on you. A little bit different. Right? But Canelo's not going to let his hands go on the inside. Right? Cotto, the film's going to lie to you. Many of you are going to look at not the Floyd Mayweather fight. And let's face it, this is a Mayweather alumni fight, right? Both guys fought Mayweather, right? Don't look at the Floyd Mayweather fight. Many of you are going to look at the Austin Trout fight, right? Both of these guys fought Austin Trout. The Canelo people will say, hey, we won our fight, right? Let me tell you, the Cotto who fought Austin Trout, who gets caught up on the end of a jab, who was there trying to box against a boxer, that Cotto no longer exists. I'm telling you, Cotto is now with Freddie Roach. He, to me, exemplifies some of Freddie's best work. It's hard now to know where Cotto is going to be in the ring. Right? He's not there to be hit with a jab. He's not. Right? He's going to be moving around the ring. Cotto, who, in my opinion, had a balance problem early in his career when he was fighting under his uncle, now has great balance. Now is able to move around the ring awfully well. Right? I know Sergio Martinez had a bad knee when he fought Cotto, but wow, did he look like he was in quicksand, didn't he? Right? Cotto now is outmaneuvering guys. Understand. Daniel Gill's a hoverer. He's not that stationary. He looks stationary against Miguel Cotto. Right? Cotto's going to move around. I believe the Canelo people are kidding themselves, and I've spoken with a bunch of Canelo people, in believing that Canelo is going to be able to touch Cotto with his jab. I don't think he is. Now, Cotto's interesting. He's a southpaw fighting out of an orthodox stance. Right? I can tell you, though, that Cotto seems to have some southpaw thing going on from the orthodox position that allows him to dodge an opponent's jab. Right? Take a look at Cotto against Paulie Malignaggi, who has a damn good jab. Right? Malignaggi wasn't able to land his jab that much on Miguel Cotto. I don't expect Saul Alvarez to land his jab on Miguel Cotto. Let me go further, too. Cotto's a little bit different than Joe Frazier. I know a lot of Canelo fans are saying, what about his uppercut? You get inside on Canelo, Canelo's going to lower his shoulder. He's going to hit you with an uppercut. Again, I feel Canelo is pre-planned. I don't think he has great reflexes. Cotto's not Joe Frazier. He's not going to come inside and stay inside. The new Cotto with Freddie Roach is just going to flash inside. In other words, he'll be inside long enough to throw some withering, devastating lead left hand. Cotto can lead with power shots. Lead left hand to your rib cage. Then Cotto's going to get out of there. Right? Canelo's going to get hit. Then Cotto's going to be over here. Right? Cotto is now hit and run. Only he's not running. He's hit and really lateral movement. Right? Let me say, I think Cotto today against Floyd Mayweather would be a much more competitive fight. And keep in mind, I took Mayweather the first time they fought. Right? This Cotto now uses the ring better than Saul Alvarez, is harder to find than Saul Alvarez, is more defensive than Saul Alvarez, is faster than Saul Alvarez. Right? So, I'm going with Cotto. I believe Cotto should get a stoppage here. Think about it. Cotto has been in the ring with the physically bigger men. There are interviews here online of Daniel Gill saying, I lost too much weight to fight Cotto. Right? He came in at 157, at least at the weigh-in, to fight Cotto. But you and I know, on fight night, Daniel Gill didn't weigh 157 pounds. Right? Cotto has been in the ring with real middleweights. Also, Cotto, let's face it, has vastly more experience than Saul Alvarez. Right? You heard me mention that Cotto fought Paulie Malignaggi, who's a difficult matchup for people. He also fought Carlos Quintana. He also fought Joshua Clottey. He fought Antonio Margarito twice. Right? He fought a younger version of Shane Mosley than the one who fought Saul Alvarez. Right? Cotto fought Zab Judah. Cotto's dealt with hand speed. Right? Cotto's even had legitimate car crashes that he's had to recover from. Right? Manny Pacquiao. Now, Saul Alvarez, I'll give him credit. He's taking on tough customers. No question about that. But he hasn't been in the ring with the Pacquiao, has he? Right? Keep in mind, Saul Alvarez's best opponent to date, Floyd Mayweather, is a guy who Cotto also fought. Right? So, in my opinion, Cotto has the edge, both from a physical standpoint. Right? He's more flexible. He can fight low. He moves better. He's faster than Saul Alvarez. And from an experience standpoint. Right? Cotto's a little bit older. Right? Cotto has been in the ring. Cotto fought Sergio Martinez, for crying out loud. Right? tough customer, savvy customer, experienced customer, right? If I can get the better athlete, who's also the more experienced guy, right, who also seems to have a punch that carries from weight class to weight class. You know what Cotto's doing at 160 pounds? The same thing he was doing at 140 pounds. He's knocking guys out, right? I'm not even sure if Cotto's at a punching power differential here. And I consider Canelo to be one of the hardest punchers in all of the sport. So put me down on the Cotto side of the ledger. I like Cotto to win this fight. I'm going to hedge the play. I believe you always have to hedge plays with Canelo. I'm going to hedge the play with Canelo by KO. Why? Because Canelo hits too hard. Why? Because when I see a warrior like Josecito Lopez with a dazed and confused and bewildered look on his face at the end of that fight, when I look at a guy like James Kirkland, who's a warrior, who's ready to fight, all night, and I'm glad for him when the referee ends the punishment he's taking from Canelo, that tells me that I need to hedge Canelo fights, even fights like this where I think Canelo gets blown out, with Canelo by KO. So the bet I'm recommending is Cotto to win the fight, hedged with Canelo by KO. Right? If you're a total daredevil, as Cotto is, quite frankly, then you want to sprinkle some too on Cotto by KO. I'll be the most shocked man watching this event if I see Saul Alvarez go the distance. I think it's that much of a mismatch, right? I think Saul Alvarez does best with guys who are going to stay in front of him. I think you saw Erislandy Lara move a little bit, and Canelo couldn't find him. Now just imagine a fighter who is going to move a little bit like Erislandy Lara did, but is going to be on the outskirts of the pocket, jumping into the pocket with power punches. Right? I'll be surprised, quite frankly, if this fight makes it to the 10th round. I like Cotto to win the fight, hedged with Canelo by KO. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here online. Visit us at gamblersadvisory.com. Thanks for stopping by.